My dear friend Adam Winkler joins us here on Monday. And Adam, we had you on in like October, I want to say, right?
Yeah, it was the very beginning of football season.
Yeah, it was towards the beginning of football season. You had just had baby number 3, I believe, which let's just get some pleasantries out of the way. How you sleeping?
I am sleeping much better than my wife, who we all know is the true superhero of this operation. But yeah, baby Caroline plowed through the 3-month mark. So she's doing great. Jess, my wife, she's phenomenal. My mother-in-law has been staying with us during the week, so I can do very important business things like come on your show.
That's awesome. That's great. Thank you, mother-in-law. We appreciate that. Also, you've got a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. I think it's time they start pulling their weight as well. I mean, if this was 1924 instead of 2024, they'd already have a job.
I mean, there's no reason that our first grader Connor can't opt out of elementary school to stay home and change some diapers. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? How are we going to prepare him for the real world for parenting if we're not teaching him these lessons now?
Yes, I know. Look, every time he changes a diaper, that's 10 minutes of screen time. I think that's fair.
The only thing with which he is concerned as it relates to his baby's sister is if she cries in the middle of the night, what if Santa doesn't come? Like that is his only issue right now. He could not care less about anything else related to he now has 2 younger sisters, but doesn't want to change her diaper. Also, isn't bothering her. But I tell you what, if he has the inclination that Santa Claus might not take his red suit down the chimney, World War III, man.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's not good, Wink. That's not good. All right. We have our Mug Club group chat, which is, we could take it because it's in the cloud and just put it in a book, bound it in leather volumes and release it, for posterity to make it seem like it was intelligent. People wouldn't understand half of it. But one of the things I thought over the last couple of weeks was interesting because our group was a microcosm of America and the way that people felt about it. We have 2 friends. This is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. We have 2 friends that one is a Texas alum and one works for them. And so they've been SEC pilled a little bit. And this is look, Texas is a fantastic team. They really only can't beat Georgia. They're really, really good. So you can't say, there's not too many knocks on them, and we'll dive into the deeper issues that they might have moving forward in the playoffs in a second. But, it was funny to hear them say after all this time of, kind of Big 12 mediocrity and then 2 good years of the football is just so much better over here. And you're like, that was the case before you guys got there, and it's still kind of the case, but this isn't the glory days of Saban versus Kirby and all that anymore.
First of all, one of those comments in the text message said, I could watch Missouri play South Carolina and see just how good the SEC is. First of all, who is torturing anybody and making them watch Missouri and South Carolina for a data point? Secondly, you talked about the glory days of the SEC. My brother is a proud Auburn alum. Paul, it's why you and I share disdain for one Dabo Swinney. But I digress. The old big bad SEC West, none of those teams are in the first 12-team playoff. So that should tell you right there about kind of the changing of the guard, if you will, and how things are different than, how they were when it was Saban and Kirby in the East, but obviously LSU with those dominant teams and Cam Newton, being paid money before it was allowed to be paid money at Auburn. That has changed. But yeah, the SEC, great football. Really good teams, elite teams, especially at the top. But Paul, as you and I will talk about, throughout this broadcast, the Big 12 isn't like Division III football all of a sudden. Like, that's still a really good league, and the fact that nobody seems to be respecting it is kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's here's the thing. It's about to be. It's funny how the Big 12 has maybe projected out to the SEC for the last few years, because for a while it was the Big 12 offenses would never work in the SEC, and then they brought those offenses over, and the Big 12 has moved. I don't think the Big 12 has a style. I mean, with 16, I don't think with 16 teams in any league you can have a style anymore. You're just going to have what works for you, and your coaching staff, what helps you win. But there's not going to be this like, well, these 10 teams all run this offense or whatever. It's not going to be that way anymore. But they move over there. Well, now with conference realignment, the Big 12 is already, like, the last 5 years has been a league chock full of parity and moving, people move up and down indiscriminately. Like, there's no rhyme or reason to it. I mean, this year you could almost take the way that the media predicted the rankings and flip them over, and that would have been it. And I think that's what the SEC is headed towards, except for the fact that they've got a couple of brands who have a bit of a lead in this race that won't fall back. Their horses are always going to run fast, just they're not going to win the Triple Crown every year anymore. Like, that's kind of over, because it's just different now. NIL, the transfer portal, revenue sharing is going to change everything, and the SEC is not immune to it. The Big Ten is the best conference this year, but I could also make an argument that having 18 teams in your league makes it hard to tell if you're really a good conference or not, or if you just have a bunch of teams that most of them don't play each other and you don't have a lot of overlap, so it's really hard to tell who's the best and who's not.
And then you have Purdue, who might be the worst program, in major D1 football. But it's so, like the SEC. So, somebody made a point on Sunday.
Did he freeze? Hold on, he's frozen.
Yeah, he froze a little.
He froze a little.
He would have made the playoffs, surely, right?
Yeah.
It's the name recognition and the reputation that the league once had, or these programs, once had, that I think the College Football Playoff Committee needs to really try and hammer home. Look, we are getting away from that. Like, this is a new era. Last year, leaving out Florida State. Last year, leaving out Georgia. Like, everybody said that change was needed. Okay, change is here, and we're not just going to respect the Alabamas of the world because they went to Wisconsin in non-conference play and won a game. You lost to Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. Like, that matters. If it's the best league in the country and you're only playing 8 games, those conference games should matter even more. And you lost 3 of them.
Yeah, and then their argument was, well, we shouldn't schedule strong in the non-conference. Well, you didn't. You played Mercer and ULM and USF and Wisconsin, so it's not like you did. And the games you lost were in your league. So is your argument collapsing in on itself, or are they making the point, which I think they don't want to say this is what Greg Sankey's line, like, their thought is. SEC losses don't count.
Right.
They don't count. So everything else, the wins should count, the losses shouldn't. So they beat Georgia and they beat Ole Miss. Like, so they have some good wins, but they beat South Carolina, right? So those count. Well, like Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, well, those don't count. They're SEC losses. So those are different than Big 12 or Big 10 or ACC losses. Like, those are bad. Like, you lose to a 6-6 team in that league, that's terrible. You lose to a 6-6 team by 21 in this league, that's fine. Like, what are we even talking about? Like, that's what they're not saying by saying this. And Alabama's just not used to, disappointment. Like, they got gifted their spot last year. And Garrett, I would like to, on that note,
okay,
and we're talking about Alabama and Georgia now. I sent you this is from Florida State Twitter, admittedly. But it's a direct quote. It is a direct quote. Semin Old School on Twitter. 2023, night before final selection. Kirk Herbstreit. FSU only managed to score 16 points with their third-string QB. Winning is nice, but it's not the only thing that matters. They just aren't the same without Jordan Travis. 2024, night before final selection. Also Herbstreit. I'm impressed with Georgia being able to score 16 points with a backup QB. They won the game. That's all that matters. It just shows how gritty they are.
It would be like if I clicked the button to mirror my screen right now. It would be just flipping the same exact thing 180 degrees. And jumping off of that too, it's like I heard some of the chatter with how Georgia was able to, beat Georgia Tech in that 8 overtime. All right. They struggled against a very mediocre ACC team, but Paul, it was a rivalry game, and those matter. Those matter so much. What? That was an SEC non-conference game that your champion won. Your recent 2-time national champion. So we know it. Conference in college football. We'll crown them, but the way they twist the narratives to your point. You lost to Vanderbilt in a construction site. Like that should count twice.
Lost to Vanderbilt. What's under the scaffolding? That's what happened. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
OSHA beat you too. Not only did Vanderbilt beat you, OSHA beat you.
Hey, Oklahoma, who never rushes the field for anything, rushed the field on you. Like, they don't like that. A 6-6 Oklahoma team, like their lowest point. Like there are people like in group therapy in Norman, Oklahoma right now, and they're like, "Well, what's wrong?" And it's like there's people like, "Listen, my wife and I we might not make it." Or like, "Hey, my son has really kind of gotten into drugs really badly," and then there's going to be like 4 people that are like, "Oh, is this the wrong meeting? I was just really sad that we're 6-6." I want a different coach. Like that's how serious it is there. And they again rushed the field. They rushed the field on Bama. That's how big of a deal it is. They're 9-3. They didn't have a leg to stand on. I feel so conflicted about Clemson because Clemson did the thing that we needed to have happen, which was, okay, if a 3-loss team is going to get in, it better be a team that won its conference title game, which they did. It's also kind of good news, bad news for the Dabo haters in the world, in that it's bad news in that, look, he won again. He's 9-1 in the ACC title game. It's just ridiculous. But it's also good news in that, well, this isn't going to, he's not all of a sudden going to figure out, hey, maybe I should go get some 5 transfer portal guys to help me out here to win. So that won't change. So that's good news. But now, for me personally, Clemson's playing Texas, and I think, honestly, for the first time in my life, I want Texas to win a game.
That's how far we've come. I will take a little bit of credit or blame for Dabo getting into the playoff. In the text chain to which we alluded to start this show, I did call out Dabo for Clemsoning when it looked like they were going to overtime. And then, the third string running back decides to return it. And then the kid hits from 56 yards on a frozen night. So I will take the reverse jinx blame on that, die on that sword for letting Dabo into the playoffs. But I also kept Alabama out of the playoff by jinxing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, it's sometimes you get the hero you need, not the one you deserve, or the whatever it is from Batman. I don't know. That's who they were. But Adam, all that being said, we say this with the SEC, I actually think the committee got it as right as they could. I mean, I think when you put it in now, look, there are functional things about this that need to change. If you're not the 4th seed, you don't need to be given a bye into the first round. Just seed the top 4 and give them the byes. Even if it happens to be 2 teams from the same conference, I'm fine with that, because then the only thing you should be guaranteed if you win the conference is you should be guaranteed the spot. But if you win the conference and you're the 13th seed, Should you really get a bye? That one I don't know about.